By the end of the 5th century, as we have seen, the western portions of the Roman Empire passed entirely into the hands of Germanic kings and their kingdoms, while in the east, the Roman Empire remained intact, as you can see on this map. So the Roman Empire did not end, and to say it ended would be to ignore this reality. Here there's a Roman emperor ruling from the city of New Rome, or Constantinople, as emperors have done for most of 2 centuries now. And Roman emperors would continue to rule from Constantinople down to the 15th century, when the city was finally conquered by the Ottoman Empire in 1453. So the situation of the Roman Empire's continuation is utterly obvious, except for the fact that in the early modern period, scholars of the West chose to deny this reality, and they created a term to designate this period of history, which they labeled not Roman, but Byzantine, which is named after the Greek city upon which Constantine had built his city. So he built Constantinople on the existing Greek city of Byzantion, or Byzantium, and hence they used this term Byzantine for this period after the 5th century. Now, for a number of reasons, all of which exposes anti-Byzantine bias, about which I'll address later in our course, this terminology becomes the norm in the West, even though it would not have been understood by the people at the time. For they called themselves Romans, and they called their empire the Roman Empire, and they adhere to Roman law, ruled by a Roman emperor, all of which is erased by the term Byzantine, but now it's commonplace to use it at present, but I just wanted to give you that historical understanding. Now in this video, I'm going to focus on the emperor here of the Roman Empire, Justinian, our central figure, and he's often viewed as this hinge figure with histories of the Roman Empire often ending with his reign, as if his reign marks the end of an era and the beginning of something new. I'll let you decide about such interpretations. But what is absolutely clear is that the impact of Justinian's reign reverberated through the entire 6th century and throughout all of the regions we have studied in this course. He is truly a giant. So who was Justinian? Well, first, he and his family are from the Balkans, as you see on this map, from the Western Balkans, from a Latin-speaking region. Latin is his native language, and he, of course, will learn and be fluent in Greek. Now, his uncle Justin decided to leave their peasant community and make his way to the big city, to Constantinople, in order to seek opportunities. And it just so happened through a fortunate series of circumstances that Justin ended up getting a position in the Imperial Guard. And from that position, Justin was able to move his way up the ranks until he became commander of that guard. And when the emperor died without heir, Justin was in a position to take his position. So this peasant became emperor. And this shows you the possibility for social advancement in the Roman Empire of this period. Now, by this time, Justin had brought his gifted nephew from the Balkans to Constantinople for the boy's education and for his career promotion, and this was Justinian. And Justinian was given the absolute best education, the UC San Diego education of his day, let's say. Justinian quickly became his uncle's strategist and key advisor, and so Justin ruled, but Justinian was already the presence behind the throne. And in 527, the ailing Justin crowned Justinian as co-emperor in April, and when the emperor died in August, Justinian became Roman emperor. He was in his 40s, and he would rule for nearly 4 decades. But very early in his reign, it looked like Justinian would not even survive, because there was a riot in Constantinople that spilled out of the Hippodrome, and this is the location of the great games of Constantinople, where the chariot racing would take place, as the most popular sport in the empire, and violence erupted in the streets. Tens of thousands of people were marauding, burning down government buildings, including the Senate House and the great cathedral of the city, Hagia Sophia, and many, many other buildings. And they were attacking the imperial palace itself, which was next to the hippodrome. So what went wrong? And the people were disaffected for a number of reasons, but there was another issue here. Justinian, like his uncle before, were outsiders. They had not been part of the aristocratic elite, and now they were in charge. And so there was much resentment against Justinian as a result on the part of the aristocratic families and the Constantinopolitan senators, who felt that one of their families should rule, not these peasant upstarts. So when the riots started, these anti-Justinian elements utilized and harnessed the violence to their own ends, promoting a rival emperor, one related to the previous aristocratic emperor. So what to do? Well, with the people out of control in the city and the emperor now barricaded in his palace, Justinian contemplated just fleeing the city. And there was a ship ready for departure at the seaside. So in this moment of doubt, early in his reign, his nerve was steeled by the steadfast will of his wife, Theodora. Now, like Justinian and Justin before him, Theodora was a complete outsider to power. She was not from an elite background at all. Quite the opposite, in fact. She grew up in a family of entertainers that worked for one of those chariot racing teams. And she became an entertainer as well, an actress as a child. And this work included sexually oriented activity and prostitution. From that start, she became the concubine of a Roman governor who then cast her away when she became pregnant. She had to make her way back to Constantinople, where she eventually met the young Justinian, who had to change Roman law so that a senator could marry an actress. There was a law banning such. He had the law changed, and the two were married and became extremely close co-rulers of empire. Theodora steeled his nerve to stay and fight. Justinian then turned to loyal and experienced generals who just happened to be in Constantinople. He unleashed them on the crowd with their seasoned troops, and tens of thousands of people were soon dead. The emperor's position was secure. So the emperor had restored order and kept his throne. He then used this opportunity to secure power further by first executing, of course, the rival emperor, second, exiling all senators who supported the rival and confiscating their property, and three, immediately beginning the rebuilding of the city. And Justinian was one of the great builders in the history of the Roman Empire. He rebuilt the city of Constantine so that it could truly be called the city of Justinian. And paramount of all the building that was going on would be the great Church of the Holy Wisdom, Hagia Sophia, which had burned down and which he rebuilt as the largest church in the Christian world. Of course, it would not have had minarets in his day. They were put up by the Ottomans after the conquest in 1453. And this would remain the largest church in the Christian world for the next 1,000 years until St. Peter's Basilica was renovated in the 16th century. So the church, like the emperor, towered over the city in the Christian world. And this rebuilding of Constantinople was almost a tangible metaphor for Justinian's imperial project. He sought to restore the Roman Empire, which had lost its way and struggled in the previous centuries. Justinian's would be an age of revival and restoration. And it began with legal and administrative reforms. Justinian sought to improve the efficiency of the state bureaucracy by reforming and standardizing law, suppressing corruption, improving tax collection, eliminating government structures that were wasteful or redundant, and he was a tireless leader. He was actively involved in the daily affairs of the empire, and he sought to guarantee that the state institutions and policies would not be subverted by private gain. To help in this reforming task, Justinian selected senior officials for their ability and loyalty rather than for any elite status. So like him, the central figures were from humble origins. They were outsiders, including his wife Theodora, whom I mentioned, and key officials involved in the reform and the legal reform I'll discuss in a moment, and even among his generals. On the other hand, those from the Constantinopolitan elite who were impacted by increased taxation or loss of revenue, they came to resent imperial activities and the officials that made it possible, and their resentment sometimes shows up in the historical record because they are among those who are writing the histories. Now, related to these reforms is Justinian's revision and codification of Roman law. He eliminated out-of-date Roman laws, he clarified existing laws, he made them accessible by issuing a code at the start of his reign, and then he revised it a few years later. This was a massive undertaking, and he combined it with the creation of a textbook for law schools to train legal officials on the code. And then there was a digest, which provided an official commentary on how to apply the law. Taken together, these three parts called the code, that's the law code, the digest, that's the commentary, and the institutes, that's the textbook, this is referred to as the Corpus Juris Civilis. And this project is an achievement as grand as Hagia Sophia itself. And this organization and codification of Roman law will have a profound impact on the development of Western law in the centuries and courses ahead. Now, in addition to the rebuilding of the city and the legal restoration, Justinian turned his eye to the lost territory of the western portions of the empire. Justinian's foreign policy was wide-ranging, with his eyes on Central Asia and the Caucasus region, and Aksum and southwest Arabia and the Red Sea and Indian Ocean trade, all of which were means to contain the threat of Sassanid Persia, with whom the empire was regularly at war. Now, early in his reign, Justinian was able to make peace with Persia, with Khusro I, whom we've discussed in another video, so that he could direct his military resources to the west to begin his goal of restoring these regions to the Roman Empire. It began with the conquest of North Africa from the Germanic Vandals, who had held this region since the 5th century, and remember, it was these Vandals who sacked Rome in 455. And there was a religious element to this reconquest. For recall that the Germans of the West held to a different Christian theology than that of the Roman Empire and that of the majority of the people in the West, who were Orthodox, or we could say Catholic. So, for Justinian, this was not only a political restoration, it was a religious one, by eliminating a heretical kingdom and restoring Christian orthodoxy. So he sent his general Belisarius on this naval expedition that proved to be a remarkable success. Roman arms defeated the Vandal army, restored the North African capital of Carthage to Roman control, and even took possession of the Vandal treasury and the Vandal king himself, both of which were brought to Constantinople, where a great triumph was celebrated to herald Justinian's victory through his general Belisarius. Justinian next sent Belisarius and his army against the Ostrogothic kingdom of Italy. And this was just after the death of King Theodoric, whom I previously discussed, and Belisarius took Sicily and then marched up the boot of Italy, taking Rome in 535. But Gothic resistance proved much more challenging in Italy, but still Belisarius was able to take the Gothic capital of Ravenna capture the treasury, capture the king, and again bring them to Constantinople. Another victory. Then Justinian was able to take advantage of an internal dispute in the Germanic kingdom of the Visigoths in Spain and seize a portion of this for Roman control. So here was a remarkable turn of events, and Roman arms and officials were again supreme not only in the east, but much of the west. Justinian was rebuilding the empire. His reforms to improve government efficiency, his legal reforms to provide judicial clarity, and now his conquests.